stop what you're doing, because what just happened in the world of NASCAR is something nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. A man who built one of the most legendary empires in motorsport history. A man who turned Dale Earnhardt into a dynasty. A man who stepped away from the driver's seat over 4 decades ago. Just strap back in. Richard Childress, 78 years old, NASCAR Hall of Famer, and as of this week, an active racing driver once again. The internet is melting down. But here's the thing. This isn't just a feel-good story. There are questions swirling around this comeback that nobody is asking out loud yet. Questions about what really drove this decision. Questions about what it means for his team, his legacy, and the future of Richard Childress Racing. Stick with me, because this story goes much deeper than the headlines. Let's set the scene. Richard Childress Racing, one of NASCAR's most storied franchises, home to 3 Cup Series championships with Dale Earnhardt, a team that has fielded some of the greatest drivers in the sport, from Kevin Harvick to Austin Dillon. And at the center of it all, Richard Childress himself, the man who drove his own car in the early 1970s before making the pivotal decision to park it, step into the ownership box, and build something that would outlast any single race, any single season. He drove his last competitive NASCAR race in 1981, 45 years ago. So when news broke this week that Childress had not only entered a vehicle under his own name, but personally climbed behind the wheel for a sanctioned NASCAR event, the sport collectively stopped breathing. Where did this happen? At a Vintage and Legend Series event that feeds directly into NASCAR's official ecosystem. An event that carries real implications for how NASCAR positions itself heading into its next era. Why does it matter? Because Richard Childress isn't just any owner climbing into a nostalgia ride. He still runs an active Cup team. He still makes calls that affect championship outcomes. He still has skin in the game. Real skin. And now, suddenly, he's a competitor again. But the question everyone should be asking isn't how he got back behind the wheel. The question is, why now? Here's what the mainstream coverage isn't telling you. Richard Childress doesn't do anything without a reason. This is not a man who acts on impulse. Every move in his career, from building his team on a shoestring budget in the 70s to signing Dale Earnhardt when nobody else believed in him, has been calculated. So why would a 78-year-old man, at this stage of his life and legacy, choose to get back in a race car? Was this a spontaneous tribute to his roots? A symbolic gesture to reconnect with the sport he loves? Or is there something else going on at Richard Childress Racing that made him feel like he needed to send a message? Because here's what we know. RCR has been under enormous pressure. The last 2 seasons have not delivered what the organization or the sponsors expected. Driver performance, crew chief changes, sponsorship uncertainty. And in the middle of all that turbulence, the boss decides to drive. Coincidence? Maybe. But then again, maybe not. Let's go back to the moment it all began. Word started circulating in NASCAR inner circles quietly, the way big news always does before it explodes. Whispers, text messages between insiders. A paddock rumor that seemed too wild to take seriously. Richard Childress is going to drive. At first, people laughed it off. A joke. Someone's misread a press release. Maybe it was Austin Dillon making a tribute run in Grandpa's old number. But then the entry list dropped, and there it was. Plain as day. Richard Childress, driver. The reaction was instantaneous. NASCAR Twitter, now NASCAR X, went from 0 to full chaos in under 3 minutes. Video clips started surfacing. Photos of Childress in a fire suit. That unmistakable silver hair. That jaw set with the kind of quiet intensity you only get from decades of competition. And then the moment arrived. Engines fired. Richard Childress, a man who last competed when Ronald Reagan was still in his first term, rolled out of the garage. What happened on track wasn't about lap times. It wasn't about winning. It was about something far more primal. You could see it in how he held the wheel. The muscle memory. The way a racer's body never truly forgets. He ran clean. He ran hard. And when he crossed the line, the crowd, many of whom weren't even alive when he last raced, gave him a standing ovation that shook the grandstands. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because not everyone was cheering. Let's be honest about something. In NASCAR circles, there's a very real undercurrent of debate about what this return actually represents. On one side, you have the purists, the old guard who see this as the most natural thing in the world. A legendary competitor returning to his roots. A reminder of what NASCAR was built on: grit, passion, and a man and his machine. But on the other side, there are serious people inside the sport asking uncomfortable questions. Is this a distraction from RCR's struggles on the Cup side? Is Childress, consciously or not, trying to recapture something that's been slipping away from his organization? When your team is fighting for relevance in the modern era of next-gen cars and data-driven racing, and the owner is out there driving vintage iron, what does that say about the culture inside the building? One source, speaking on background, not willing to go on record, put it bluntly: Richard bleeds racing. But RCR needs him in the ownership suite right now, not behind the wheel. That's a loaded statement, and it raises a question nobody wants to say publicly. Is this comeback a celebration or an escape? Then there's the technical side of what happened during the event. At one point mid-race, Childress's car showed signs of what appeared to be a handling issue, the kind of tight, push-through-the-nose behavior that plagues teams running older setups. Crew members on the pit wall were visibly animated. Radio communications were clipped and urgent. Was it mechanical? Was it setup? Or was it simply the reality of a 78-year-old body fighting a machine that demands everything you've got? Nobody gave a straight answer. And that silence? In NASCAR, silence is never just silence. The internet, predictably, went nuclear. Within hours of the news breaking, Richard Childress was trending across every major platform. NASCAR's official accounts shared footage. The reaction was split almost perfectly down the middle, and that split tells you everything about where this sport stands right now. Fan Camp 1. Pure, unfiltered joy. This is what NASCAR is about. Legends never die. Nobody earned this moment more. Dale Earnhardt tribute accounts, and there are thousands of them, flooded the timeline with black and white photos of Childress and the Intimidator side by side. The nostalgia was overwhelming. Fan Camp 2. Skepticism wrapped in respect. Love RCR, but this feels like a PR stunt. Is this what the team needs right now? Cool moment, but it doesn't fix the point standings. Former drivers weighed in carefully. Several current Cup veterans, who compete under the RCR umbrella or have deep ties to the organization, offered measured, glowing praise. The kind of praise that means something, but is carefully worded enough not to invite follow-up questions. One prominent NASCAR analyst said on a podcast, "You can't manufacture this." Richard Childress getting back in a race car is either the most human story NASCAR has told in years, or it's the opening chapter of something much bigger. That last part, opening chapter of something much bigger. What does that mean? What does he know that we don't? Let's talk about what this actually means beyond the emotion, beyond the spectacle. For Richard Childress Racing, this moment is a double-edged sword. On one hand, the visibility is enormous. RCR just generated more organic, unsponsored media coverage than it has in years. The brand is trending. The name is everywhere. In a sport where sponsorship dollars follow eyeballs, that matters more than you think. But on the other hand, the scrutiny that comes with that visibility cuts both ways. Every move RCR makes on the Cup side over the next several months will be analyzed through the lens of this comeback. If the team performs well, the narrative writes itself. Childress reignited the fire. If the team continues to struggle, the knives will come out. The owner is playing nostalgia games while the race team burns. For Childress's personal legacy, this is complicated. He is already immortal in NASCAR history. Nothing that happens on track, good or bad, changes his Hall of Fame status, changes what he built with Earnhardt, changes the chapters already written. But legacy is a living thing. It grows or it erodes based on what you do at the end of the story. And Richard Childress just added a chapter nobody expected. Whether that chapter reads as triumphant or cautionary depends entirely on what comes next. These are embedded throughout, highlighted here as standalone. But then everything changed. What happened next, nobody predicted. And just when you thought the story was over, it wasn't. Here's where it gets complicated. Because in NASCAR, nothing is ever just what it looks like. So here's where we land. Richard Childress is back behind the wheel. The crowd roared. The moment was real. But the real questions, are still unanswered. Is this truly just a one-time tribute? A man honoring his roots before the clock runs out? A beautiful, uncomplicated moment in a complicated sport? Or is Richard Childress signaling something? Is there a larger restructuring coming at RCR? A leadership shift? A brand reinvention? A new chapter that requires the founder to physically remind everyone who built this? And perhaps most intriguingly of all, if he did it once, could he do it again? Because sources inside NASCAR's event planning structure have hinted that this may not have been a standalone appearance. That conversations are already happening about future events, about a format where Childress and other legends could compete on a more regular basis. If that's true, if Richard Childress is not just returning for one race, but potentially returning to competition in a structured way, then everything we think we know about this story is just the beginning. Is this the end of his comeback? Or is the real comeback still coming? The answer might arrive sooner than anyone expects. This sport moves fast, faster than any news cycle can keep up with. If you want to be the first to know when the next chapter of this story breaks, when Richard Childress makes his next move, when RCR makes their next announcement, when NASCAR drops the next bombshell nobody saw coming, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because we cover NASCAR the way it deserves to be covered. Deep, dramatic, and never late. The stories are coming. Don't miss them.